The Grand Hall of the Galactic Embassy was a place where all races of the galaxy could come together in peace. This evening was no different. Stars and shimmering lights filled the vast room as representatives from different worlds, humanoid and alien alike, mingled. It was a celebration of the peace agreement signed just a few weeks ago, a rare event in the history of the galaxy. On the surface, everything seemed perfect. Among the invited guests was Daniel, a human envoy tasked with representing Earth's interests. He stood near the edge of the hall, nervously adjusting his uniform, trying to act as though he was comfortable in the presence of so many powerful beings. It wasn't easy. He wasn't accustomed to being surrounded by creatures with scales, fur, or wings. Some had 4 arms, some were only visible as floating lights, and others were as humanoid as himself. But despite the intimidating appearance of these beings, Daniel couldn't help but feel awe and wonder. This wasn't just an event. It was history. The treaty was a step towards unity between humanity and the vast galaxy of civilizations, a dream he never thought would be possible. The weight of his responsibility didn't escape him, but he took solace in the fact that he wasn't alone in this effort. He had a team of diplomats and experts with him. The room buzzed with conversations, and the scent of exotic foods filled the air. Yet his mind kept wandering back to one thing: Princess Liara. She had been the most talked-about guest at the event, but for a reason that Daniel had not expected. The princess wasn't just another royal. She was known across the galaxy for her sharp intelligence, unmatched beauty, and most importantly, her mystery. Few people knew anything about her personal life, and yet for some reason, Daniel felt drawn to her, a connection that he couldn't quite explain. From the moment he had seen her enter the room, he was struck by her presence. Her tall, slender form moved gracefully through the crowd. Her skin, a soft shade of lavender that seemed to glow in the low lights of the hall. Her dark, flowing hair framed her face perfectly, and her eyes, golden and piercing, seemed to scan the room, making contact with each person before moving on. Daniel had caught her gaze a few times, but each time she would quickly look away, leaving him wondering if it had been intentional or just a coincidence. Tonight, however, he was certain it was intentional. Liara made her way towards him through the crowd, moving with the same confidence that had always captivated him. As she approached, the people around her made way, as if clearing a path for royalty. She was dressed in an elaborate gown made of shimmering material that changed colors with each movement. The gown fit her perfectly, its deep violet hues highlighting her otherworldly beauty. She stopped just a few feet from him, and for a moment, neither spoke. The air between them felt charged, and Daniel felt his heart race. He tried to find his words, but they seemed stuck in his throat. "Envoy Daniel, I believe," she said, her voice calm yet commanding. "I've heard much about your diplomatic skills." Daniel forced himself to speak. "Your Highness, the pleasure is mine. I didn't expect to see you here. I thought you would be busy with other matters." "I'm always busy with matters, but tonight I'm here for something different." She paused and smiled slightly. "I wanted to see what humanity had to offer up close. I've heard good things about your species, though some still doubt your place in this galaxy." Her words were both kind and pointed, and Daniel felt the weight of them. He wasn't sure how to respond, but before he could form an answer, Liara continued, "Tell me, Daniel, what do you think of our world? What do you think of us, the many species who inhabit this galaxy?" Daniel took a breath, careful to maintain his composure. "It's overwhelming, Your Highness. The diversity is unlike anything we could have imagined, but it's also beautiful. The way different species live together and share ideas, there's nothing quite like it on Earth." Liara's eyes softened, and for the first time she took a step closer to him. "You speak honestly, Envoy, I appreciate that." Her closeness sent a wave of warmth through him, and for a moment, the rest of the room seemed to fade away. Daniel wasn't sure why, but something about her made him feel both nervous and at ease. It was as if her presence alone was enough to calm his anxiety, yet her power and status reminded him of just how out of place he felt here. Before he could speak again, a voice called out from across the room, "Princess Liara, The call was from one of the other diplomats, and the princess looked away for a moment, her gaze lingering briefly on Daniel before turning toward the new arrival. "I must excuse myself," she said, her tone suddenly more formal. "But I'll return shortly. It was a pleasure to speak with you." "Of course, Your Highness," Daniel replied, but she had already turned and walked away, her gown shimmering as she disappeared into the crowd. As she left, Daniel felt a mix of disappointment and confusion. Had that really just happened? He couldn't be sure, but something told him this meeting was far from over. There was a feeling in the air, something unspoken, that lingered between them. The rest of the evening passed in a blur for Daniel. He tried to focus on the event, on the treaties being discussed, but his mind kept drifting back to Liara. He couldn't shake the feeling that their brief conversation had been more than just a chance encounter. There was something about her, something that made him wonder if his life or the future of Earth itself was about to change forever. Hours passed, and as the evening came to a close, Daniel found himself once again near the entrance, ready to leave. He had spent the rest of the night in discussions, trying to keep his composure, but Liara's words echoed in his mind. He thought about how she had looked at him, how she had spoken to him. Was it possible that she had been intrigued by him as much as he was by her? As he stepped toward the door, he noticed a movement in the crowd. Liara was standing by herself near the grand windows that overlooked the alien city below. She appeared, deep in thought, her gaze distant, as though contemplating something far beyond the walls of the hall. Daniel hesitated for a moment, then found himself walking toward her. There was something he needed to ask, something he needed to know. But as he drew closer, the words caught in his throat. Was he truly ready for whatever this could mean? Before he could take another step, Liara turned, her eyes locking with his. Her lips curled into a smile, but this time there was something different about it. A knowing smile, as though she had been waiting for him to approach. "Envoy Daniel," she said softly, her voice carrying the weight of her words. "I believe you have something to say to me." Daniel's heart raced as Liara's eyes met his. He felt as though the whole world had stopped, the noise of the banquet hall, the laughter, and the chatter from all around, all fading away until there was only her, Princess Liara. The feeling was strange, almost intoxicating. He had never felt such an intense pull towards anyone, let alone someone of such status and power. For a moment, he stood frozen, unsure of what to say. The weight of the situation suddenly dawned on him. He had never imagined he would be standing here with a princess, let alone speaking to her alone. His mind, still racing from the earlier conversation, struggled to form the right words. I don't know what to say," Daniel stammered, his nerves showing despite his best efforts to hide them. He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. "I never expected to be in this position, Your Highness. You've caught me off guard." Liara smiled, a soft, understanding smile, as though she knew exactly what was running through his mind. "I can see that. The weight of diplomacy often leads to moments where words fail, but sometimes the silence says more than any conversation could." Her voice was soothing, almost hypnotic, and Daniel found himself staring into her golden eyes caught in their depth. He had been to countless diplomatic events, met many high-ranking individuals, but none had ever made him feel this way. None had ever left him feeling so exposed. "I didn't expect this," Daniel admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "I came here to represent Earth, to help make peace. I never thought it would lead to this." Liara took a step closer, to him, her presence overwhelming yet comforting. "And what do you think of this unexpected turn, Daniel?" Her tone was playful, but there was an undercurrent of something deeper. "What do you think of me?" He hesitated, unsure how to answer. Her question was too direct, too personal, but he found himself unable to look away, captivated by the sincerity in her eyes. I think you are unlike anyone I've ever met. Your people, your world, they're so different. Yet, there's something about you. Something that feels familiar. Liara's eyes sparkled with a mixture of amusement and intrigue. She tilted her head slightly as if considering his words. Familiar, she repeated softly. I have heard that from others before, but I wonder if they truly understood what they were saying. Daniel frowned slightly. What do you mean? There are many who look at me, Daniel, she said, her voice low. But they only see a princess, a symbol of power. They see a means to an end, a way to achieve political goals. But you see something else, don't you? Daniel felt his stomach tighten. Was he that obvious? Was his interest in her, his curiosity, written all over his face? I don't know what you mean, he said quickly, hoping to deflect the conversation away from something that was starting to feel too personal. Liara didn't look offended. Instead, she seemed even more intrigued. You see a person, not a ruler. And that, she said, stepping even closer, makes all the difference. The air between them grew thick, heavy with unspoken words. Daniel could feel his heart racing again, and he struggled to keep his composure. He had always been the calm, collected diplomat, the one who could navigate any situation with ease. But this was different. Liara was different. She took another step closer, now only a few inches away from him. Do you know why I spoke to you tonight, Daniel? Her voice was softer now, almost intimate. I wasn't simply announcing a political alliance or making a gesture. No, I wanted you to understand something deeper. Daniel swallowed hard. What do you mean? Liara's smile faded, and her eyes became more serious, more focused. I wanted you to understand that this is not just about treaties or alliances. This is not just about politics. It's about something more personal. Daniel felt his pulse quicken. He could sense the shift in her tone, the change in the atmosphere. Personal? He repeated, feeling a mixture of confusion and curiosity. What are you saying? For a brief moment, Liara didn't answer. Instead, she reached out, almost as if she were testing the air between them, before gently placing her hand on his arm. The touch was light, but it sent a shock through him, as though the simple contact carried all the weight of the galaxy. I'm saying, Liara began slowly, her voice low and deliberate, that I've never met anyone like you, Daniel. Not in all my years. And I wanted you to know that before everything changes. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. What was she saying? Was this some kind of royal test? A game? Or was it something more? He opened his mouth to speak, but found that the words wouldn't come. What could he say to that? How could he possibly respond to such a bold and unexpected statement? Liara seemed to sense his uncertainty. She stepped back slightly, her hand dropping from his arm, though her gaze never left his face. I know this may be difficult for you to understand, she said, her voice soft again. But in my position, I've learned to recognize moments when important things, are about to change. This connection between us, it's not something I can ignore, and neither should you. Daniel's mind raced. He had always known that the stakes were high in his role as a diplomat. He had known that peace with the alien races would not be easy, but this was something he hadn't prepared for. The implications were too vast, too complicated. Princess, he said, his voice a little stronger now, I'm here to do my job. I'm here to help build a future for both of our peoples. But I can't pretend I understand everything. About your world or about you, I'm just one person. A human, You're a princess. Your life is full of complexities I can't even begin to imagine. Liara regarded him for a moment, her expression unreadable. Then, to his surprise, she smiled, a soft, genuine smile. I never asked you to understand everything, she said, quietly. But I do ask you to listen, and to trust me. There are things at play here that you may not see yet, but in time, you will. Daniel nodded slowly, still unsure what exactly she was asking of him, but he knew one thing for certain. His life The future of Earth and the future of the galaxy itself had just taken a turn he hadn't expected. As Liara turned to leave, she paused for a moment, her back to him. "You will see, Daniel. You will understand. But only if you open your heart to the possibilities." And with that, she was gone, disappearing into the crowd once more, leaving Daniel standing there, his mind whirling with questions he didn't have answers to. The following morning, Daniel couldn't shake off the events of the previous night. As he awoke in his modest room at the Galactic Embassy, the images of Liara's golden eyes and her words replayed in his mind. He couldn't stop thinking about her. Her presence, her boldness, the way she had looked at him, the way her hand had rested lightly on his arm. But what did it all mean? What was she really asking of him? He ran a hand through his hair, trying to focus on the task at hand. His job was to help facilitate the peace treaty and establish strong, lasting relationships between Earth and the alien worlds. But that wasn't what had his mind spinning. No, it was the connection, the bond, if he could even call it that seemed to be forming between him and Liara. After all, he was just one person, a simple diplomat. What did he have to offer someone as powerful as her? He tried to push those thoughts away and focus on the meeting scheduled for the day. The treaty was important, and it needed his attention. Yet, no matter how hard he tried to concentrate on the documents in front of him, the princess's words kept returning. Her invitation for him to listen, to trust her, to understand. Daniel sighed and ran his fingers over the papers again. "Focus," he muttered to himself. "You're here for a reason." He stood up, pulling himself away from the desk and walking toward the window. The view of the sprawling alien city below was breathtaking. The buildings were unlike anything he had seen on Earth, tall, elegant, and shimmering with a strange energy that made them glow even in the daylight. It was a city built on a scale that humans could only dream of, a reminder of how far humanity still had to go to catch up with the galactic powers. Just as he was about to turn away from the window, he noticed a movement below. His eyes narrowed as he saw Princess Liara, her silhouette unmistakable even from a distance. She was walking along a grand walkway, her graceful form standing out among the other figures. There was no doubt that her presence commanded attention wherever she went. His heart skipped a beat, and he couldn't stop himself from watching her. He wondered if she was thinking of him, if she had meant everything she had said. Focus, he reminded himself once again. There would be time for answers later. For now, he needed to stick to his mission. The day dragged on in the embassy. Meetings with diplomats, discussions about trade, talks about alliances. It all felt like a blur. Every so often, Daniel would catch glimpses of Liara across the room, their eyes meeting for just a second before she turned away. Each time, his heart would race. It was as though she was always near, yet always just out of reach. By the time the evening arrived, Daniel felt exhausted. He had spent the entire day surrounded by alien dignitaries trying to navigate the complex politics of the situation, but his mind had been elsewhere. The princess's words, her touch, the way she had looked at him, they all weighed heavily on his mind. As he walked through the corridors of the embassy, his thoughts drifted back to her. What was it that made him so drawn to her? He had met powerful people before, been around leaders of nations, but none of them had made him feel this way. A voice snapped him out of his thoughts. Envoy Daniel. He turned to see Liara standing at the end of the hall, her figure framed by the soft light. She was as stunning as ever, her presence commanding the space around her. "Princess Liara," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "I didn't expect to see you here." She smiled, her eyes bright and knowing. "I thought it was time we spoke again. I've been thinking about our conversation from last night." Daniel took a deep breath, his heart pounding in his chest. "I've been thinking about it too," he said honestly. "And I'm not sure I understand what you meant." Liara stepped closer, her gaze never leaving his face. "I see," she said softly. "You're wondering if I spoke out of impulse or if there's more to it. You're wondering if you should trust me. But trust isn't something that can be explained in a single conversation. Daniel nodded, still unsure of where this was going. I don't know if I'm ready for this. I came here to help with a peace treaty, not this. I don't even know what this is. Liara tilted her head, her expression softening. I never asked you to be ready. I only asked you to listen, to trust that what we share is not just a fleeting moment. There are things happening, things beyond what we can control. You may not understand now, but you will. Daniel took a step back, his mind swirling with questions. What do you want from me, Your Highness? He asked, his voice betraying the frustration he felt. Why me? Why now? Liara seemed to hesitate for a moment, as though weighing her next words carefully. Because I believe you have something that the others do not. You have an open heart, and that is something rare in this galaxy. It is easy to get lost in politics, to become consumed by the power of our positions. But you, Daniel, you see beyond all that. And that is why I want you to understand. His mind raced. She spoke as if there was something much bigger at play, something that Daniel couldn't yet see. But he had to admit, there was something about her that made him want to listen, to believe her. I'm just one person, he said quietly. What can I possibly do that will make a difference? Liara stepped closer again, her eyes intense. You will be more than just one person. You will be a bridge between our worlds. What happens next, Daniel, is not just about treaties or alliances. It's about the future. Your future, my future, our future, and you will be the key to it all. Daniel swallowed hard. His head was spinning, and the weight of her words settled heavily on his shoulders. The princess wasn't just speaking of peace anymore. She was speaking of something much larger, something he couldn't yet fully understand. But in that moment, he knew one thing for certain. His life was about to change forever. I don't know what this all means, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. But I'm willing to listen. I want to understand. Liara smiled, a look of relief crossing her face. That's all I ask, Daniel. All I ask is that you trust me. In time, you will see that everything I've said is true. The moment stretched between them, and for the first time, Daniel felt the weight of the universe upon him. He didn't know what was to come, or how things would unfold, but he knew that whatever happened, nothing would ever be the same. As Liara turned to leave, she paused and looked back at him. Remember, Daniel, the galaxy has its own way of testing those who are willing to stand between two worlds. And you are about to face that test. With those words, she walked away, disappearing into the hallway, leaving Daniel standing there, his thoughts swirling in a storm of uncertainty and anticipation. The following days felt like a blur to Daniel. The routine of meetings, discussions, and diplomatic talks continued, but his mind was elsewhere. He couldn't stop thinking about Liara, about her words, her touch, and the connection that seemed to be growing between them. Every time he saw her in passing, his heart would race. Her presence was magnetic, pulling him in, making it harder to focus on anything else. The treaty negotiations had been going well, but it was clear that Liara was still preoccupied with something more than just politics. She had become more distant. In their interactions, her eyes often clouded with thoughts that Daniel couldn't quite understand. He couldn't help but wonder if he was part of whatever she was dealing with, or if he was just caught up in something he wasn't ready for. One evening, as the sun dipped below the alien horizon, casting a strange orange glow over the embassy, Daniel received a message from Liara. It was short and to the point. Meet me at the garden. We need to talk. His heart skipped a beat. It wasn't uncommon for them to have private conversations, but there was something urgent in the message that made his chest tighten. He wasn't sure what to expect, but he knew it was important. He made his way to the garden, the long corridors of the embassy feeling unusually empty. The silence made him even more aware of his own thoughts. What had she meant by "we need to talk"? Was it about the treaty? Or was it about something more personal? When he reached the garden, he found Liara standing near a fountain, her back to him. The garden was a serene place, with strange alien plants growing in clusters, their petals glowing faintly in the evening light. The air was cool and fresh, a stark contrast to the tense atmosphere inside the embassy. "Your Highness," Daniel called softly, not wanting to startle her. Liara turned to face him, her expression unreadable. "Daniel," she said, her voice calm but firm. "I'm glad you came. We need to discuss something important." He nodded, taking a step closer. "What's going on, Liara? Is everything all right?" She hesitated, her gaze briefly shifting to the fountain before returning to him. "I've been thinking a lot lately, about what's happening, about our connection. There are things I haven't told you. Things that I should have made clear from the beginning." Daniel's heart pounded. He had known something was off, but hearing her speak so seriously made the situation feel even more complicated. "What do you mean?" Liara took a deep breath and stepped closer, her eyes soft but filled with an intensity Daniel hadn't seen before. "The future of my people is uncertain. There are factions within my court who do not approve of the alliance with Earth. They see it as a weakness, and there are those who would use any means necessary to prevent it from happening." Daniel frowned. "You're saying the treaty is in danger?" "Not just the treaty," Liara replied, her voice growing more urgent. "The stability of my entire kingdom is at risk. There are those who would do anything to see me fall from the throne, and I can't fight this alone." Daniel felt a chill run down his spine. He hadn't expected this conversation to take such a turn. He had always known that the political landscape was complicated, but he hadn't realized how deep the danger ran for Liara. "Is that why you've been distant?" he asked softly. "Because of the pressure?" Liara nodded, her eyes dark with worry. "Yes, but it's more than that. I need your help, Daniel. I've come to realize that the future of my people and the future of our alliance may depend on you. You're more than just a diplomat. You're a symbol of what we can accomplish together. If I can prove that our bond is genuine, that it's not just a political move, the factions will have no choice but to accept it." Daniel shook his head, trying to process what she was saying. "But I'm just one person. How can I help with something this big? How can I change the fate of your kingdom?" Liara stepped closer, her eyes searching his face. "You don't see it, do you? Your presence here, your willingness to stand by me means more than you know. You represent the trust between our worlds, and more than that, you represent hope. Hope that we can build something better, something real." Daniel felt a rush of emotion. He had never thought of himself as a symbol. He had always been the one behind the scenes, making things happen quietly away from the spotlight. But here, in this moment, he was being asked to stand beside Liara, to become something more than just a representative of Earth. "I don't know if I'm ready for this," he said, his voice shaking slightly. "This is bigger than anything I've ever faced." "I know," Liara whispered. "But sometimes we are called to do things we don't think we're ready for. And in the end, those are the things that define us." There was a long silence. Between them, the weight of her words hanging in the air. Daniel looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time, he saw the vulnerability beneath her royal demeanor. She wasn't just a powerful princess. She was someone who was carrying the fate of her people on her shoulders. "I want to help you," Daniel said, his voice steady now. "I'll do whatever I can." Liara's eyes softened, and a small smile tugged at the corner of her lips. "Thank you," she said, her voice full of gratitude. "You don't know how much that means to me." The moment lingered, and for a brief second, the world outside the garden seemed to disappear. It was just the two of them, standing together, united by something deeper than politics, something that neither of them fully understood yet. But as much as Daniel wanted to believe that everything would be all right, a part of him couldn't ignore the growing sense of unease. Liara's kingdom was on the brink of instability, and their bond, whatever it was now at the heart of it all. It wasn't just about peace anymore. It wasn't just about alliances. It was about survival. Liara turned to face him fully, her expression serious. "There will be a meeting tomorrow, one that will determine the future of the treaty. I need you there. I need you to stand beside me, to show them that this alliance is more than just politics, that it's real. I'll be there, Daniel promised. He didn't know what the next day would bring, but he knew one thing for sure. He couldn't back down now. Whatever happened, he would stand by Liara, not just as a diplomat, but as someone who believed in her and the future they could build together. As they stood together in the garden, the night deepening around them, Daniel realized that his life had changed forever. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with challenges and dangers that he couldn't yet foresee. But in that moment, with Liara by his side, he felt a sense of resolve settle over him. The future was no longer something to be feared. It was something to be fought for. The morning of the critical meeting arrived, and the weight of the day's events pressed heavily on Daniel's shoulders. As he prepared for the gathering, he couldn't help but feel the weight of everything that had transpired. The treaty, the connection with Liara, the looming challenges that both of them now faced. It wasn't just about negotiations anymore. It was about the future of two worlds, the survival of Liara's kingdom, and his own role in the uncertain path ahead. He stood before the mirror in his room, adjusting his uniform. The familiar black and silver of the Earth diplomatic attire felt heavier than usual today. There was more at stake now than just making a good impression. Daniel had become a symbol of hope for an alliance between humanity and the alien civilizations. But that wasn't why his heart was racing. No comma. It was Liara. Her words from the garden echoed in his mind. She had asked him to stand by her to show the others that their bond was real, that this was more than just politics. But how could he prove that? Was it even possible to show the depth of their connection to those who viewed their relationship through the lens of power and tradition? The knock on his door interrupted his thoughts, and Daniel opened it to find one of the embassy staff standing there. "Envoy Daniel, the meeting is about to begin. Princess Liara is waiting for you in the conference room." Daniel nodded, taking a deep breath. "Thank you," he replied, and followed the staff member down the long corridors of the embassy. His footsteps felt heavy as they echoed through the quiet halls. When they arrived at the conference room, the doors opened, revealing a large, sleek space. Several alien dignitaries were already seated around a long table, their gazes fixed on the door as Daniel entered. Among them, Liara sat at the head of the table, her presence commanding and yet serene. Her gaze met his, and for a moment, the chaos of the room seemed to fade away. It was as if the world had narrowed down to just the two of them, and everything else, every other challenge, every obstacle felt distant. He took his seat beside her, the quiet hum of the room growing louder in his ears. Liara gave him a subtle nod, a silent gesture of support, and Daniel couldn't help but feel a sense of responsibility settle over him. Today, he wasn't just representing Earth. He was standing beside the woman who had come to mean so much to him, in a battle for more than just political gain. It was a battle for the future of their two worlds. The meeting began, and the atmosphere in the room shifted. The alien dignitaries, each representing different races, had their own opinions on the treaty and the alliance. The air was thick with tension as they discussed trade deals, shared technologies, and the potential benefits of unity. But beneath all of that, there was an undercurrent of doubt. Many of the factions were hesitant about aligning themselves with humanity, a species they viewed as unpredictable and untested. The negotiations were intense, each word carefully chosen, each offer weighed with precision. Liara remained calm, her eyes focused as she spoke to the dignitaries. She answered their questions with poise, but Daniel could see the strain in her eyes. She was doing more than just negotiating a treaty. She was fighting for her kingdom's survival. She was fighting for the future of everything she had worked for, everything she had built. He could see the weight of it all in her eyes, and as she turned to him for support, he knew he couldn't let her down. He had promised her that he would stand by her, that he would help her through this. And now, more than ever, he understood just how much she had sacrificed to be where she was. At one point during the meeting, a particularly vocal delegate, a representative from a race known for their warrior culture, spoke up, his voice booming across the room. I still don't understand why we should risk our future by tying ourselves to the humans. What makes them worthy of our trust? What makes them worthy of our alliance? The delegate's voice was filled with contempt and his eyes locked onto Daniel. As though daring him to answer, the room grew quiet, as all eyes shifted to Daniel. He felt the weight of their gazes, the skepticism that radiated from the other delegates. It was a moment that felt like it would decide everything. His mind raced, but one thing was clear: he had to speak up. He had to show them that humanity was more than just the sum of their fears and prejudices. He stood up slowly, his heart pounding in his chest. Liara's gaze remained steady on him, but there was a subtle flicker of encouragement in her eyes. This was his moment. Trust isn't something that can be given lightly, Daniel began, his voice calm but firm. It's earned, and I understand why you have doubts. Humanity is young in the grand scheme of things. We've made mistakes, but we've also learned from those mistakes. We've fought wars, and we've built peace. We've endured hardship, and we've risen from it stronger than before. He paused, glancing around the room, meeting the eyes of the alien delegates who were still watching him intently. What we offer isn't just a treaty or a promise of trade. We offer partnership. We offer the opportunity to build something, together. Yes, we are new to the galaxy, but we have a unique strength, a strength that comes from our ability to adapt, to change, and to grow. We may not be perfect, but we are committed, and that, I believe, is worth trusting. The room was silent for a moment as the delegates processed his words. He could see that some were still skeptical, but there was a shift in the air. The tension that had filled the room seemed to dissipate, if only slightly. One of the delegates, a tall, reptilian alien, finally spoke, his voice slower, more thoughtful than before. You make a compelling argument, Envoy Daniel, he said. Perhaps there is more to your species than we have given credit for. The murmurs of agreement spread across the room, and Daniel felt a rush of relief. They weren't there yet, but they were getting closer. Liara's hand brushed against his, a quiet gesture of gratitude. He glanced at her, and for the briefest of moments the world outside the conference room seemed to vanish. It was just the two of them, standing together, facing the unknown future. As the meeting continued, Daniel found himself more and more immersed in the discussions. The delegates were still divided, but Liara's leadership and his own words had made a difference. The future of the treaty was no longer as uncertain as it had seemed. But the day wasn't over yet. There was still much to be decided. The factions still had their doubts, and there would be more challenges ahead. But Daniel was no longer afraid. He knew that whatever happened, he had given everything he had to this cause. He had stood beside Liara, and together they had faced the doubts and fears of those around them. As the meeting drew to a close, the alien delegates left the room, their faces thoughtful but more receptive than before. Daniel felt a sense of accomplishment, but there was still a lingering sense of uncertainty. The future was still unclear, but they had taken a step forward. Liara turned to him as the room emptied, her eyes warm with appreciation. Thank you, Daniel. You were brilliant today. He smiled, feeling a sense of pride in her words. We did this together. She nodded, her gaze thoughtful. Yes, we did. And no matter what happens next, I know that we will continue to build something better. Together. Daniel felt a surge of hope in his chest. Whatever the future held, he knew one thing for sure. He wasn't alone. And together, they would face whatever came next.